Um, Hello, boys and girls. Welcome to the Spartan Life Coach. Finally, I've got the honour and pleasure of being able to interview Sam Vaknin, who's here with us today. And he's been kind enough to offer me the chance to dialogue with him and ask him some of the questions I've had for a long time now. So thank you very much, Sam, for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It takes courage.
Well, speaking of courage and comfort zones, we were just talking about pushing people out of their comfort zones. Sam, do you enjoy provoking people?
I enjoy exposing the fact that people gravitate inertially into comfort zones. And within the comfort zone, they feel omnipotent and omniscient. They become narcissistic. People who are embedded in their comfort zones, people who refuse to examine themselves, their nearest and dearest, their lives, and their society, are people who feel comfortable with injustice and evil. And then it's a very short step towards leveraging injustice and evil for your own ends, which is a very good, as good a definition of narcissism as I've ever heard.
Yes. Yes. I made the mistake before I started recording of feeding into this false narrative where I said to you that your provocation is sadism, but that's a reframe. Provocation and pushing people towards reality and critical thinking and objectivity, that's the essence of what philosophy should be, isn't it?
Philosophers, healers, religious leaders, and leaders in general should do exactly that. They should force one into confronting and facing reality. However, there's a question of motivation. Why am I so honest? Why do I push people to confront reality? Why did I introduce the concept of narcissism?
Yeah.
And so on and so forth. I didn't do it because I love people or like them.
Yeah.
I did it because I enjoy witnessing people's discomfort.
Yes.
and pain. So my motivation may have been sadistic. However, I think people should be much more concerned with the outcomes than with the motivation. After all, we never know for sure why people do what they do.
Yeah.
And we should be much more interested in the walk than in the talk. So I think the outcomes of everything I've done have been pretty beneficial, regardless of my motivation.
Absolutely, and that's what frustrates me when I see people just permitting themselves the indulgence of just saying, "Oh, he's just a bad man. He's a narcissist. You shouldn't talk to him." And I'm thinking, well, do you care where the medicine comes from? If it heals you, if it makes you better, why are you concerning with what colour socks Sam Vaknin has got on and what he ate for breakfast? It's none of your fucking business. Just listen to the content of what is being said and apply it.
I think the world is so complex, nowadays especially, that people tend to reduce messages into personalities. They tend to personalize. The personalized communication, the personalized ideas, their personalized messages. So they deal with persons, with people, with a messenger instead of a message. I think the wiser segment of the population would make a distinction between me and my work. As a person, I may be reprehensible and obnoxious, and to a large extent I am. I may be sadistic, and to a large extent I am. But it's also completely irrelevant.
Yes.
What is relevant is my message and my work, and which I think has brought comfort and knowledge to by now millions. And so you ignore my work at your peril.
Yeah.
It's self-destructive, self-defeating.
I 100% agree with that. One of the things I'm wondering is, have we got an internet culture where if you challenge somebody or provoke them, or even just refuse to agree with them, that gets reframed to cruelty, sadism, and malicious intent?
Well, I think it depends to a very large degree on the setting. You and I, we are operating within a very well-defined ecosystem.
Yes.
It's an ecosystem of technology, ecosystem of the Internet. Now, the Internet is not a representative sample of humanity.
No.
Less than 20% of all people are on the Internet. And of these 20%, I would be shocked if more than 2% are actually active. The vast majority of internet users are passive consumers of what the internet has to offer.
Nice.
Less than 2%, I would venture to speculate, less than 2% are actually active. Now, people who are active on the internet are exhibitionistic. They are, to some extent, narcissistic.
Yes.
They are very driven. They regard themselves as significant in the sense that they have something to convey, to share. They believe they can motivate other people. They believe their life story has meaning, which transcends their personal biography. They believe that they are part of perhaps some cosmic plan, and so on and so forth. They are in this sense grandiose. So the people we come across, the people we interact with, are not a representative sample of humanity and not a representative sample of victims of narcissists. They are a self-selected subgroup of victims of narcissists. And this subgroup, as I've just said, is both narcissistic and exhibitionistic.
Okay, so this is going to definitely set some people off. We were talking a little bit before the interview about how there's this strange subculture within the internet for the narcissism forum of people who are obsessed with narcissism as a subject, who follow your work, who follow my work, who even as they are very vocal, certain and ferocious in condemning others for narcissism, display some pretty strong traits themselves.
Yes, and I told you prior to our dialogue, I told you that I think what has happened is that when I started my work in the mid-90s, I cast narcissism in the terms of a cosmic morality play. I cast it as good versus evil. Narcissism, I suggested, was all evil. Narcissism was actually the reification of the principle of evil in the cosmos, or at least in human relations. So it became a morality play. And then we have a religious situation, a biblical situation, where the victims are all good and the narcissists are all bad. It's black and white. This is a primitive defense mechanism, psychological defense mechanism known as splitting, where we select one person or group of people and call them all black, and then we are all white.
Yes.
And so there is this clash between good and evil that is timeless. You can find it in Greek mythology, in every mythology and religion in human history. You can find this timeless clash between the principles of good and evil. And I think what's happening today with narcissism is just the latest embodiment, the latest round in this good versus evil morality play.
Right. This, do you think that there's a case for saying that some people have actually become addicted to the idea of themselves as the victims of emotional abuse?
I think what has happened is that, as I told you, the world has become so chaotic, so complex. All the social units that we used in the past to organize our world, to make sense of it, to understand our place in it, and to interact with it, all these social units have crumbled. The church, religion, the family, the community, and even the nation state. We are left atomized. We are floating in space with no mooring and no anchor. No one gives us a good explanation of why are we here, where are we going, and what the hell are we doing?
Yeah.
And so here comes this narcissism thing, and suddenly everything falls into place. It acts as a super narrative. It's kind of an organizing principle which makes sense of the world and of us in the world. Here it is. We are the victims, therefore we are all good, therefore we are the force of light. And there is the narcissist, who is all bad and is all evil and is the force of darkness. And what are we? We are soldiers in this war between good and evil, between light and darkness. We are like the biblical people of old. We are on a crusade to eradicate evil from our midst. It's kind of Puritan. It's like harking back to the 17th century in New England. It's a witch hunt. It's the same like Salem. It's Salem writ large,
Yes.
you know.
Yeah.
But it has a comforting effect. It calms you down. It tells you. It suddenly puts you in context, provides you with context. It makes sense of your life, makes sense of what you were doing, And it makes sense of your suffering. Because you didn't just suffer. It wasn't only your husband that inflicted pain on you. It wasn't just your boyfriend who made you suffer. It was a narcissist. And a narcissist is transcendental.
Yes.
It's a force of nature.
Yeah.
It's something much bigger than your husband or your boyfriend. You have been victimized by a cosmic power. And this is a very aggrandizing feeling. It also gives you some narcissistic satisfaction, narcissistic supply.
I can see now why when I release any videos or write any posts that attempt to humanize the narcissist, the response from people is visceral. It's rage, and it comes from the gut, and it surprises me and it's ferocious. But based on what you've just said, and now I see why, I'm taking something away from them that they need.
Yes, you are taking away the meaning of it all. You see, if you've been victimized by another person, another guy, another human being, then it's quite a meaningless thing, because torture, pain, suffering is, between you and me, meaningless.
Right.
It's as meaningless as life itself. Mm-hmm. It's a random event. But if you have been tortured, victimized, and gone through suffering inflicted by something bigger than life, like the narcissist, if the narcissist is an abstract notion, a concept rather than a specific human being, then your life acquires meaning. And as I said, there are grandiose narcissistic elements in it. Because if you are the victim of the principle of evil that is acting throughout the universe, that's one thing. And if you are the victim of Joe Schmo, it's another thing, you know.
But then, was there some masochism then in you putting yourself in the position of becoming the ultimate scapegoat for the narcissism community by saying, you put yourself forward in that role? And I do think when I see the way people talk about you and the way people handle you as a concept, I see mobbing. Did you consciously put yourself in the role of the scapegoat for that rage?
There is no question that in the last 20 years, the anti-narcissism movement, if you wish, has acquired mob-like characteristics. In political science, it's called ochlocracy. It's uncontrolled. It's I would say primordial.
Yeah.
It's a power beyond the participation of any single individual, and it is a group mind. It's a group mind. Individuals openly succumb to this groupthink. They suppress and ignore their own better judgment in order to conform to the group mind.
Yes.
And to comport with the members of the mob.
Yeah.
It's a classic thing. It happened in Nazi Germany. It happens throughout. It has happened throughout history a million times.
Yes.
So we have a mob culture here, whose focus is the evil narcissist.
Yeah.
And when I started out, remember that I started in 1995. That's 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. The landscape as it is today is as new to me as it is to you. Okay. And would have been totally unpredictable in 1995.
Okay.
In 1995, what I thought I was doing, I thought I was popularizing an obscure diagnostic and statistical manual clinical category.
Yes.
That's all I thought I was doing. And at that time, narcissists were not demonized. They were not considered, a supernatural phenomena or a natural force. They were just people, like you and me. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, these people are defective, there's something wrong with them. Mm-hmm. And because there's something wrong with them, they inflict pain and damage and so on their nearest and dearest, and stay away. That's been my extremely simple message.
Yeah.
There was no hint of demonic possession or what have you.
Right.
But then it took a life of its own. And I think it took a life of its own because Americans got involved. Don't get me started. Americans got involved, and the United States and its denizens, its inhabitants, they have a very specific profile. They are still the most religious group of people on earth.
Yes.
And their religion is still, how to put it, inquisitorial, puritanical, fundamentalist. They're fundamentalists.
Yes.
They have a culture of exhibitionism. Remember Jerry Springer, an opera to some extent.
Yeah.
So they have a culture of exhibitionism. So they brought to the table, so it started as a European thing. I live in Europe.
Yeah.
In 1995, it started as a European thing. You know, I wrote my book, and I started a website, and I had my support groups, and most of the members were European. Actually, the largest group has been from Ireland for some reason.
Oh, right.
And then Americans discovered the whole thing. And they transformed it. They injected into it the elements of their own culture, which, among others, are exhibitionism.
Right.
Mass communication, in other words, mob communication, and religious fervor or religious ardency.
Yes.
So that's it. It's become an American phenomenon.
So there was never it was never your intention to be the scapegoat for, you know, hundreds of thousands of people are angry who you don't know are angry with you.
They're not angry with me. They hate my guts viscerally and virulently. There's a difference between anger and hate. I don't think they can be angry at me because I've done nothing bad to them.
Yeah.
If at all, I've done only good.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they can hate me. And now the thing is that when I started out, I immediately and openly informed about my public that I am a diagnosed narcissist, that I've been twice diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. And I've done that because I wanted to provide them with access to a narcissist. Narcissists are, by definition, not self-aware, or some of them are not self-aware, and if they are self-aware, they're pretty proud of the fact that they're narcissists. So they are not likely to cater to the emotional needs of the victim, to the post-traumatic state of the victim. They're not likely to provide closure. They're not likely to help in any way, shape, or form. And I wanted to stand in for these narcissists and be there as a quintessential narcissist and try to help the victims obtain closure through me. I wanted to be their narcissist by proxy.
Okay.
And that was it. But then as the movement took on a life of its own, as narcissists became demonized, as religion, as the whole thing acquired religious dimensions, as the mob took over, and so on and so forth, naturally I was swept along.
Yes. Yes. Do you think that there is a fundamental difference between the overt narcissist and the covert narcissist, and do you agree with some of the literature out there that's saying there's an overlap between covert and borderline personality disorder as well?
Well, recent studies are transforming the way narcissism is viewed.
Right.
First of all, until very recently, there used to be a distinction between kind of classic, or if you wish, malignant. I mean, there are numerous labels, but let's use the label classic. There's been a distinction between classic narcissists. These are the narcissists who are not self-aware, they are grandiose, and so on and so forth, and they are self-assured, they're self-confident, they have no problem with self-esteem. On the very contrary, because of their grandiosity, they regard themselves as, you know, the best and the greatest and the most perfect and brilliant, and what have you. Between this kind of narcissist and the compensatory narcissist. It's a narcissist that actually harbors an inferiority complex and compensates for this inner inferiority complex by pretending to be perfect and brilliant and so on.
Yes.
But recent studies show that this distinction is invalid.
Okay.
That all narcissists, without exception, have an inferiority complex or neediness. Right. And all of them. And by the way, if I may tout my horn, I have been the first to suggest this 20 years ago. 20 years ago I said there's no such thing as a self-assured, confident narcissist. There's no such thing. So narcissists hate themselves. They feel inferior. They feel defective. And they're trying to compensate for that by pretending that they're not. And this is exactly the distinction between true self and false self. What is the false self? The false self is everything that the narcissist wishes that he were and is not.
Right.
The false self is omniscient, omnipotent. The narcissist is not. The false self is what the narcissist wants to be when he grows up. You know. And so the false self is needed because narcissists are insecure. They feel inferior. They feel defective and deformed. They feel bad objects, worthless, and so on. And today, the cutting edge thinking in narcissism, in academia, in universities and so on, research labs, the cutting edge thinking is that indeed all narcissists are like that. Now, if all narcissists are like that, the distinction between covert and overt, or classic and covert narcissists, or classic narcissist and shy narcissist, or fragile narcissist, all these distinctions begin to melt down.
Right.
Why they begin to melt down? Because all narcissists are like that.
Yes.
All of them are shy. All of them are fragile. All of them are needy.
Yes.
And so what is the distinction between... The distinction is in the thespian skills, in the ability to act.
Uh-huh.
Some narcissists simply cover up better for their inner landscape, which is a landscape of shyness, seclusion, inferiority, fear, anxiety, angst, and so on. They cover up for this landscape much better.
Okay.
They have trained themselves, or have been trained, to cover up for it. And they are the classic narcissists. They project a false self. They project an image of resilience, self-confidence, perfection, brilliance, and grandiosity. Other narcissists have never come around to it. They have never acquired the skills needed to camouflage, to disguise their fragile inner landscape. And this is what we call covert narcissists. And because they've never come around to doing so, they tend to team up with narcissists because it's kind of a merger and acquisition. Mm-hmm. If I'm a covert narcissist in the sense that I have never learned the skills to hide my insecurity, mm-hmm. I've never acquired the talent to not to inform the world how fragile I am and how vulnerable I am, then maybe if I team up with a classic narcissist, he can cover up for me.
Right.
He can sort of be my false self by extension. I think classic narcissists have a false self, and this false self caters well to their emotional needs.
Right.
Covert narcissists failed to develop a false self. Yeah. And so they team up with another narcissist who actually acts as their false self by proxy.
Okay. So the whole model by which we've been using, looking at the subject, could be completely faulty then?
I think all these distinctions, as I said, there were teething problems. The whole field started in the mid-90s. Yeah. I mean, there have been studies of narcissists, of course, dating back to 1915. Yeah. Freud coined the term narcissism in 1915, and then we had Kohut in 1974. Mm-hmm. But nothing serious. The first serious studies of narcissism started in the mid-80s and then later in the mid-90s. So it's a very new field. And narcissism is such a multifaceted phenomenon that labels proliferated. Including, I'm also guilty. I also contributed a few labels, like inverted narcissist,
Right.
But it's all because we fail to see the underlying unity. It's exactly like I'm a physicist by training. It's exactly what happened in physics. We had electricity, mm-hmm. we had magnetism, and then one day we discovered that electromagnetism is one and the same.
Right.
And then we united these with other forces like the weak force and the strong force and so on and so forth. So as a field ages and progresses, unity emerges. And I think ultimately we will discover there's only one type of narcissist.
Right.
Absolutely one.
Yeah. Where I first started wondering about that was I listened to the narrative on the forums and listened to my clients talking, and I got the impression of this sort of alpha male, handsome man in a red sports car driving around having sex with women and then abandoning them as the ultimate sort of idea of a narcissist. And I thought, this sounds like a 2D cardboard cutout. It sounds like a concept. It doesn't sound like a real person to me. So do you think both the victims and the researchers kind of fell for that false image that the narcissists were creating?
I think everyone, myself included, has been flabbergasted and baffled and puzzled by the enormous complexity of narcissistic disturbances of personality.
Yeah.
And the reason narcissism, pathological narcissism, and by the way, healthy narcissism, the reason narcissism in general is such a complex phenomenon is because it underlies all other mental health mechanisms and even, I would say, disorders. Narcissism is when we become ourselves. Narcissism is when we acquire identity. It is so early in life and involved in so many mental health processes that it's really, really kaleidoscopic, if you wish. So there were two types of reaction. Some people began to split hairs, and then you had inverted versus classic versus covert, somatic versus cerebral, and what have you.
Yeah.
And other people, and those were the analytically minded people. I'm an analytic type, so what I did, I began to split hairs. I said, when there's somatic, there's cerebral, there's inverted, there's this, there's that. Mm-hmm. And many others did the same, of course, yes? And then there were the types who can't cope with, who are not analytic. They can't cope with complexity. So what they've done, they've reduced everything to a caricature.
Right.
Both the victim and the narcissist. So as far as they're concerned, it's all a cartoon, an unfolding cartoon animated film.
One of the other questions that I wanted to ask you about, again, I know this is going to be a provocation for some people. I watched an interview you did. I really enjoyed it. It was a bit of a fractious interview on the subject of empathy. And in that interview, you said that empathy has become this kind of meme, a bit of a meaningless meme. Could you talk to that for a moment, possibly?
I think, as I said, narcissism, empathy, it's a currency that's been used so frequently in so many contexts that it has lost its value. There's an inflation of these terms. Yes. They've lost their value. They've lost their original value because narcissism is an extremely well-defined, especially in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual Edition 5, the latest one. Yeah. Narcissism is an extremely well-defined clinical construct.
Yes.
And this clinical construct doesn't fit 95% of what's written online.
Right.
People infuse narcissism with so much nonsense and so much extraneous material that has nothing to do with the clinical definition of narcissism, that narcissism has actually become a philosophical concept, moral concept, a part of ethics, if you wish, but nothing to do with psychology. Yeah. So same happened with empathy. Empathy is a very, very well-defined concept. It's been studied for well over 100 years. The study of empathy started in Germany, by the way, but however counterintuitive that may sound. It started in Germany, and there, of course, they don't use the word empathy. But it started in Germany, and by now there are numerous studies and so on. Empathy is a very well-defined mechanism of relating to other people. Yes. And it involves several processes and so on. But people took the term empathy, and now it has subsumed other terms, such as pity, such as mercy, such as compassion, and so on. And it's not nice to say, but empathy has nothing to do with mercy or pity or compassion. Yeah. Absolutely nothing. Yeah. It's simply a way of interacting with other people by sharing a universe of information or assumed information regarding their inner world. We call it the intersubjective agreement. It's like, I can't really know what's happening in your head, but had I been an empathic person, which I'm not because I'm a narcissist, but had I been a normal empathic person, even though I do not have access to your mind, and I will never have access to your mind, I can use the tool, the instrument of empathy to make certain safe assumptions as to what is happening in your mind. And having made these assumptions, I am likely to have certain emotional reactions to my newly acquired knowledge.
Yes.
As simple as that, and as constricted as that.
Yeah.
It's a very, very narrow term. But it took on a life of its own, exactly like narcissism, and now it encompasses every type of interaction between people. And the opposite of empathy, or disempathy, is now a curse word. You know, it's you're not empathic, or you are a narcissist.
Well, that's why I stopped using the term. I stopped using empathy because I saw it so abused and prostituted, and even the way clients were using it. It did become this stick to beat people with. You're not being empathic to my pain. You're not showing me the care and attention I deserve. Ergo, you are a narcissist. It happened so frequently that I thought it almost became a red flag for me for that borderline personality type. If somebody was obsessed with empathy and used the word empathy a lot, I started to think, well, this person might actually be on the spectrum for borderline personality disorder.
Yeah, and you know what's a big part of the problem? A big part of the problem is that victims inhabit an echo chamber. Apologies for my accent, by the way. I mispronounce words, I assume.
No problem. I've found myself in videos copying some of the way you say words, and I have to hold it back and say, no, that's not the right way to say it. Say it with an English accent.
Okay. So, victims inhabit an echo chamber. Mm-hmm. They rely on each other for guidance, but they essentially only reflect each other's feelings and concerns and so on. So they never exit this huge cave in which they are entombed. You know, mm-hmm. It's like Plato's cave.
Yes.
They are in this cave, and all they see is the shadows on the wall, and they assume this is reality. But the thing is, outside of this cave, there is a huge effort in universities and research labs and government finance programs all over the world, a huge effort to understand and decipher narcissism. Mm-hmm. There's never been anything remotely like this before. Right. There are 2 to 5 studies published a day, mind you.
Really?
2 to 5 a day.
Oh, wow.
I'm following all of them, of course. I'm reading all of them. I've even subscribed to very expensive databases. So, mm-hmm. But if you read these studies, your view of narcissism is so essentially and fundamentally transformed that a lot of what the victims are saying is tripe.
Right.
For example, it used to be the view that narcissists do not have empathy.
Yes.
But that's very, very old hat.
Right.
In the last month alone, there have been studies that have demonstrated that narcissists actually do have empathy, but only for other narcissists.
Oh, really?
Then there have been studies, studies were published that supported my contention that narcissists and psychopaths actually do have a type of empathy, which I call cold empathy.
Yes.
Cold empathy is actually full-fledged empathy, only without the emotional component.
Okay.
It means that you can put yourself in other people's shoes, you can read their mind or access their mind, or presume to access their mind. You can put yourself in their shoes. You can empathize with them. Mm-hmm. You can realize what it means to be Richard. I can realize what it means to be Richard, mm-hmm. you know. But you do all that without an emotional component. So once I realize what it means to be Richard, I won't have any emotional resonance.
Yeah.
I won't react with sorrow or compassion or I won't have any emotion. No emotion will be provoked by my ability to put myself in your shoes.
Yes.
And this, I call it cold empathy.
Yes.
Narcissists and psychopaths leverage cold empathy to penetrate your defenses. Getting to know you better via empathy allows me to leverage or to take advantage of your vulnerabilities.
Yes.
To find the chinks in your armor.
Yes.
Did you ever stop to think about the following? If narcissists don't have empathy at all,
yeah.
If they do not understand what it means to be human, if they can't put themselves in your shoes, how can they ever exploit you?
Of course.
How can they ever abuse you? How can they ever push your buttons? if they don't know where the buttons are, or even that you have buttons. So clearly, narcissists do have empathy. However, this empathy is emotionally deficient, and they use it only with their own kind or in order to obtain certain benefits and advantages like narcissistic supply, or in the case of psychopaths, money, sex, and so on.
Yeah. So this is the kind of empathy that a military tactician would need when deciding what his enemy is likely to do next. It's that kind of empathy, isn't it?
Yeah, or a police detective trying to decipher the mind of a criminal,
right.
or a serial killer, and so on. So, but if you talk to victims or if you visit victim forums, the first thing all these self-styled experts, self-appointed experts, will tell you is that narcissists don't have empathy, and they're very proud of it, like they've rediscovered the wheel. Narcissists don't have empathy, they tell everyone, and they don't bother to read. They don't bother to update themselves. They don't bother to and so they keep saying the same things. It's repetitive, it's misleading, and it's an echo chamber.
Yes. Yeah, I've been guilty of a few of them. I used to say that narcissists will never apologize and they demonstrate no empathy, and both have been proven several times in the academic literature to be totally false. I
found your work to be well informed. Mostly.
Thank you.
Maybe you're not following every single study that's ever published, but you are compared. Definitely, you're well informed.
One of the things that I found early on was that I found the willingness to fall back into subjectivity and opinion very, very frustrating and very, very annoying.
Yeah, it's like I've made up my mind, don't confuse me with the facts.
Exactly that. And I think, well, that's, nothing good has ever come from that sort of stance in human history. So I was thinking, well, how can we bring back some critical thinking and some objectivity into this stuff? So I haven't read, I don't keep up with the research like you do, but just recently I did go through, I think, 20 papers, and they're all papers not even particularly recent, they're from the last 10 years. And I was thinking, my God, the narrative that we have online regarding narcissism is drifting from the latest academic research hugely. And I think
divergence, complete divergence, I agree.
Total divergence, and there's this almost an agenda online to keep it biblical, to keep it good versus evil, the war between God and the devil, and we don't want any complexity messing up that narrative.
So that's it. In 1995, it started off as a scientific endeavor. I started it off, at least, as a scientific endeavor. I tried to popularize some concepts in science, some scientific texts like the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. I tried to popularize it, and then I tried to provide myself as an example of a narcissist for purposes of closure. That's how it started. And then it somehow got transformed, malignantly transformed, from science to mythology.
Yes.
And now it's mythology. Now it's 99% mythology. No one is interested to hear about the latest, nothing. There's no interest whatsoever. I can see it in the number on my channel. I try to, from time to time, introduce the latest in research, and there's no interest whatsoever. If I post a video titled, Narcissists are aliens, I get like 1 million views, and then if I post a video saying, latest in research, I would get 500 views. No one is interested.
No, because I suppose it kind of has almost a pornographic effect, doesn't it? They're watching it for a feeling.
Yeah, great word. Absolutely, yes. Great choice of word. Actually, absolutely. It's pornography.
It's pornography that just serves it's emotional porn. They please, Mr. Sam Vaknin, just reassure me that my ex-girlfriend was a piece of shit and I had no responsibility in it whatsoever.
More than a piece of shit. Please reassure me that I fell victim to a supernatural force, to an esoteric force, to something beyond my control. I couldn't have done anything about it. Please absolve me of my personal responsibility. It's a force of nature. Narcissism is like hurricanes or viruses or tigers. I fell prey to inexorable, uncontrollable nature, and as personified by the narcissist.
Is this told me the other day, you taught me about a psychological concept called the alloplastic defense. Does that represent an alloplastic defense, that I couldn't have been just ripped off by some silly girl who was a bit of a con artist, a very average, everyday, daft girl? I must have been ripped off by a girl who had demonic supernatural powers. Does that represent an alloplastic defense?
Yes, in my view, absolutely. I think the majority of victims which interact with us online. I want to be very precise. As I said, this is a self-selecting subspecies of victim. It's not representative of the entire body of victims of narcissists, which I believe is we are oblivious to, because they don't end up online. They end up consulting their friends and family, or end up in therapy sessions, but very few of them end up online. Very few of them end up being exhibitionists, exposing their life for scrutiny and so on.
Yeah.
But yes, vast majority of these victims, from my experience, have what we call an external locus of control.
Right.
External locus of control and alloplastic defenses, they go hand in hand.
Right.
An external locus of control means I don't control my life. My life is controlled by some force from the outside. Some force in the outside, at the outside. So this is an external locus. It's it could be my boss, the state. Someone else is guilty. Someone else is responsible for my failures, for my defeats, for my misfortune. It's not me. I've had nothing to do with it. I'm a victim.
Yeah.
I'm a victim. That's a classic definition of a victim. And here we come to the celebrated term, and magnet.
Yes.
Narcissist magnet. Magnets are objects.
Yes.
They don't have a mind of their own. They are acted upon. They're totally passive.
Yeah.
And they are never guilty. You cannot attribute responsibility to a magnet for being attracted to another magnet. You cannot blame a magnet for moving in that direction or this direction. A magnet is a magnet is a magnet.
Yeah.
And magnet is the ultimate abdication of personal responsibility, of personal judgment. It's the suspension of one's moral agency.
So the idea that I am just a codependent personality type, I'm a narcissistic and N-magnet personality type, again, you would say this is an alloplastic defense that just absolves you of all personal responsibility.
Exactly. Alloplastic defense is a fancy word for it's not my fault. I am who I am. I am a magnet. What can I do about it? And I am subject to these inexorable, powerful, omnipotent, actually, external forces which do with me as they please. And there's nothing I can do to resist it, to exert personal choice, to make the right decisions, to assume responsibility for the consequences of my actions, because these are not my actions.
Yeah.
This is not my choice, and these are not my decisions.
Yeah.
I am acted upon from the outside in a way that is naturally dictated by nature.
Yes.
It's a law of nature. So this, in order to believe this utter nonsense, you also have to assume that the narcissist is a force of nature.
Right.
And this is where, I have a profound disagreement with Ross Rosenberg's work. Rosenberg is a healer, and I admire and appreciate his work, but not when it comes to this concept of N-magnet, which, by the way, he didn't invent. It's a concept that's at least 17 years old. I first heard it in 1999 in a victim forum, appropriately.
Okay. People were describing themselves as narcissist magnets, were they?
They say, well, I keep falling for the same guy, for the same type of guy. I keep being abused. So I must be a magnet. I must be attracting them somehow. There's something in me that attracts them to me, and so it's not my fault. There's something in me,
Yes. Yeah. I've used, before I understood narcissism and studied it, I used the same term myself. There's something in me. These people keep popping up in my reality. There's something in me. I feel like a magnet. But again, as you say, that could have been very quickly and easily resolved if somebody had taught me this is an alloplastic defense. You are attracted to these people. You're engaging with them to, I don't know what I was trying to do, play out some weird masochistic emotional play, or I don't know what it was, but I was doing it, but it was me that was doing it. It wasn't a magnet that was doing
Exactly.
it.
Whatever you were doing, and you were repeating. We do have in psychology the concept of a repetition complex.
Yes.
We do have it in psychology. When we keep repeating earlier conflicts in our lives, unresolved conflicts, usually with primary caretakers like parents, teachers, role models,
yes,
even peers that we admired. So we have these unresolved conflicts, and we try to resolve them with new people all the time, and these new people are exactly the type of people with whom we had the unresolved conflicts to start with.
Right.
So we have a repetition complex. But a repetition complex is nothing to do with magnetism or natural forces. It is a choice. Everything you do in life is a choice and a decision. You settle upon certain people and certain relationships. It is your decision and your choice. Therefore, to some extent, it is your fault. You can't absolve yourself of responsibility this way by relabeling yourself, by declaring that you are not a human being, that you are an object, subject to physical forces.
This narrative, these words and the concepts that you're choosing to describe this with, even though it will be provoking to some people because they'll feel like they're having something precious to them being taken away, I would think this would be 100 times more effective in actually helping people to heal and get over it and move on with their lives than the other narratives that you see dominating the subject.
I must confess to having lost a lot of faith in people's wish to be healed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, they protest. The lady protesteth. Yes, they protest volubly that all they want is to be healed and so on. But I think there's a lot of emotional reward in being in a permanent state of victimhood.
Okay.
You are the center of attention. You are the subject of commiseration.
Yes.
You are the recipient of compassion, and so on. It's very rewarding emotionally. I think victimhood is an addictive state. And I think, therefore, it is what we call in behavioral or behaviorist psychology, it's called a self-reinforcing behavior. It's a behavior that has its emotional rewards, and so you keep repeating it. I think one of the reasons that people get attracted to unsuitable, unavailable, and abusive partners is because it guarantees them the propagation and continuation of their state as a victim.
Yes. Yeah.
It is very important for them to become a victim because it has become an integral part of their self-identity. And it has become a cause. It defines it's a little like a drug habit.
Yes.
Drugs do have, of course, an element of biochemical addiction. They re-regulate or redefine neural pathways in the brain, no question about it.
Yeah.
But they also have an extremely strong psychological component.
Yes.
The drug habit provides you with an exoskeleton, provides you, for instance, with a reason to get up in the morning.
Yeah.
It provides you with a narrative of your life, a goal, provides you with goals, short-term goals, mind you, but goals all the same. The drug renders your life meaningful, however bizarre this sounds. It sort of redefines your identity. Mm-hmm. And so I think victimhood is habit forming. And indeed, in some psychological schools, we call it learned helplessness.
Yes.
It's a form of learned helplessness. And it has emotional rewards. Victims would react ferociously, viciously, and ragefully if you challenge their victimhood.
Well, there's an effect that I've observed online, and just on my Facebook page, I have friends of mine who know nothing about narcissism. They check it out, see what I'm doing, and they all ask the same question. They ask about the linguistic concept of my narcissist this, my narcissist that, and they pointed out they sound like groupies talking about a rock star. There is this supernatural demon, and he picked me. And there seems to be a they don't sound sad and traumatized as much as they sound thrilled.
Well, I'm not sure I would agree with this generalization, but I think that many of them are traumatized and sad and everything. But yes, you're right, I think, or they are right, to say that they feel chosen, that they feel a select group, that they feel that, as I said before, that they are soldiers of good versus evil, that they feel part of an unfolding Armageddon. Armageddon, you know, the final judgment, the last judgment, the battle. So the Narcissist is the modern substitute for the Antichrist.
Right.
And it's a religious worldwide battle unfolding. Actually, I can direct you to web resources which explicitly equate the Narcissist with the Antichrist and say clearly that the forthcoming Antichrist would be a narcissist, no doubt about this. So, and narcissist has crept in and has substituted for psychopath. For example, I've watched 7 or 6 seasons of a program, a TV series called In Treatment.
Okay.
Wonderful, by the way.
Oh, okay. In
Treatment. It's an intimate look into a series of therapy sessions, fictionalized therapy sessions. And then, never mind, there's a lot going on there. But the only specific mental health disorder mentioned throughout the 6 seasons is narcissistic personality disorder.
Yeah.
Borderline is never mentioned, not once, believe it or not. Psychopathy is not mentioned. Nothing. No other mental health issue is mentioned.
Yes.
Not schizophrenia, nothing. But narcissistic personality disorder has been mentioned 7 times in 7 different episodes.
Right.
So I think narcissism took over as the cipher. It stands in for all mental health disorders. If there's something wrong with you, you must be a narcissist. And now let's have the details.
Well, I've noticed the same thing, that in modern culture it is popping up more. People are using the term malignant narcissist in adverts for films and descriptions of characters within films, and it seems to be the disorder du jour, doesn't it? Everybody is talking about narcissism right now.
The current winner of the Pulitzer Prize for poetry won the Pulitzer Prize for a poem in which he says, you should get rid of your how did he put it? Arrogant self-image. And then he goes on throughout the poem to use verbiage, which is essentially about narcissism.
Right.
Throughout the poem. It's a poem about narcissism.
Wow.
And he won the Pulitzer for it. And then I saw another performance artist, Maria Rabinovich, I think her name is. And what was her line on PBS? She said, you must get rid of the false self, you must work with the true self. And, it became a part of the vocabulary of the 21st century, because it has power, it's very potent. It explains not only an obscure mental health disorder, it seems to explain collective behavior, so people are talking about collective narcissism of societies, of cultures. So it seems to explain collective behavior, it seems to explain a myriad social phenomena, including terrorism, including serial killers, including mass shootings, it has very strong explanatory power, narcissism.
Yeah. Where do you see, I'm aware that we're coming up to almost an hour now, so I'll finish with this question, if I may. Where do you see this moving to next? Where do you see the field of narcissism and the study of narcissism going next?
I think the narcissism, what you and I are doing, the victims we come across online, the narcissists we come across online, because I'm being a narcissist, I'm frequently contacted by self-styled narcissists and psychopaths. Yes? So I think all this has become a cultural phenomenon, cultural societal phenomenon, which has nothing to do, or very little to do, with clinical diagnostic categories. I think that's precisely why universities, professors, research labs are distancing themselves from narcissism forums and so on online.
Right.
I corresponded with many academics, and I I proposed to them to provide them with access to my list and so on, and they were very reluctant. I think they feel that narcissism online is adulterated.
It wasn't the term psychopath dropped for the same reason, because it was adulterated and it was just being so misused.
Exactly. So I think we're going to continue to see this cultural, societal phenomena. I think it is at its beginning. There's a whole cottage industry, you and I know best. There's a whole cottage industry around it. It's going to grow. And many people are going to enter the field, many more are going to enter the field, and they are going to contaminate it even further. Or you know what, let's not use the word contaminate, because it's a value judgment. They're going to move it apart from the clinical setting even further. And I think it's going to end up as a cultural social phenomenon. On the other hand, in universities, research labs, and the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual Committees, and ICD now is being rewritten, and so on, in more academic settings, narcissism for the first time is going to be investigated thoroughly and properly. And they are going to come with very surprising insights, surprising to most people. Right. I don't want to sound boastful, but at this stage I haven't been surprised. They failed to surprise me. Yeah. Perhaps because I have a privileged insight into narcissism, being a narcissist myself. Yeah.
So the academic community may very well save the field to an extent by just saying, well, you know, what you're saying narcissism is out of date. It's wrong. What these people are talking about on the forums is wrong. This is what the latest data actually is suggesting. Do you think the academic world could save it?
I think the academic world has given up implicitly and explicitly on the population at large. I think they're studying narcissism as they would. It's a little like the vaccination debate, you know. Yeah. They gave up. You know, there's vaccinations, and people are saying that vaccines cause autism and what have you. And at the beginning, academics try to dissuade them. They try to say, what are you talking about? There are no studies connecting vaccination with autism and this and that. And after a few years, it dwindled and then vanished. And now academics don't bother, simply don't bother. Yeah. There are these millions who keep saying that vaccinations cause autism, and that's it. And they made up their mind, don't confuse them with the facts. I think that's exactly what's happening in narcissism.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time. It was a really...
no, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
No problem at all. I recommend, boys and girls, you go and click this link here, subscribe to Sam Vaknin's channel, and have a look at his other channels as well. I don't know much about politics, but I always enjoy hearing your views on the latest political developments around the world.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for making yourself available today. It was great.
A pleasure, and anytime if you want to do something in the future, I'm available. Maybe this time I'll interview you. Oh, yeah. I'm serious. I greatly enjoy your work.
That would be cool. Thank you very much.